The Feed.
Understanding podcast downloads and metrics, including what is the podcast market size? Insights from the Podcast Landscape 2025 Report, Part 1, claiming your podcast in Apple Podcast when you don't have access to your original email. Sharing your podcast in Spotify just got easier, and stats, mean and median download numbers. Hello, I am Elsie Escobar, Director of Community and Content at Libsyn, and this is episode 301 of The Feed, the official Libsyn podcast, the podcast that takes it beyond how-to podcast into keeping you podcasting, with podcasting tips and information for the everyday podcaster and taking you inside Libsyn. Now, if you are starting a podcast or you're simply looking to find a new home for your podcast, use the code THEFEED, all one word, to get up to 2 months free. Now, if you would like to get featured on the show, please send in a 30-second promo of your show. 30 to 60-ish seconds promo of your show, could be episodes also. How do you do it? You just attach it to an email and send it to thefeed@libsyn.com. If you don't have a promo, but you do have some things that you would like to talk back at us about, you can always send it also to thefeed@libsyn.com. It would be amazing if you send in your voice feedback. You can call us at 412-573-1934, or you can use SpeakPipe at speakpipe.com/thefeed. All of these links are in the show notes. Please refer to those and you can tap and get us that feedback right away. Everything is done via email, and it's always first come, first serve, or in the best way that I possibly can do it. And now on to our main conversation with Rob Walsh, VP of Podcaster Relations at Libsyn, as well as my co-host. Here we go. Hello, Rob.
Good generic time of the day, Elsie. How are you?
I'm good. I think I'm still recovering from podcast movement. And then we took a trip over to Pittsburgh, Rob. As soon as I landed from Podcast Movement, I flew over to Pittsburgh, which is where we recorded our last episode. And now I'm home, but I'm feeling like I'm still traveling. And I guess I shouldn't say anything because you literally are still traveling.
I am traveling. I am at CrimeCon, and it's in Denver. And I've thrown up maybe on 4 flights in my life. I fly a lot.
Yeah.
And 2 of them were going into Denver because it's so bouncy. And it was almost my 5th one yesterday. And I was so nauseous. And it was where you feel hot and the sweats come on. As my wife would say, a hot flash. And it was just the nausea and the sweating. And I had the bag in my hands and I was ready to go. And I almost lost it. And then one of the schools that Porter was possibly looking at was University of Denver. And I just texted my wife. I go, he is not going to University of Denver. It's off the list.
Oh, my God, because of the plane.
Yes. So I landed here. We are here at CrimeCon. So we'll talk. It starts, after this recording. So I'll be able to give some more information on how the show went on the next episode about when we do our Where Were We At. But, I'm looking forward to, there's a few different podcasters from Libsyn that are here. Moms and Mysteries is here. DNA ID, Jessica's here. So I'm looking forward to meeting those folks and some others that host with Libsyn. And some that don't realize they will soon be hosting with Libsyn.
Oh, okay. Nice. That's even better.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. All right. We've got a lot of stuff to cover today and things we probably won't get a chance to cover today. So let's just get started. But it seems like you have here some stuff about Chrome and downloads and things.
Yeah, so this was an email that was sent in, and a person wrote, "Hey, Rob, a long time no chat. Hope all's well. I just had a huge influx of Chrome source downloads. It looks like a couple of downloads are over much, but not all of my 600 plus episodes, like 60% of my downloads over the past 24 hours. Is Chrome the new Safari of not real downloads? Regards, NR." And I just wrote, "Yep. I would assume any of those Chrome downloads are pretty much bogus. Make sure you're not using any marketing services that promise quote unquote guaranteed downloads, guaranteed audience, organic audience. Those are all fake. Also, if you're running a mailing list, I came across this past week, you're running a mailing list and using Aweber, do not put in your RSS feed for your podcast. There's a place where you're sending it out. It asks you to put in an RSS feed and it'll create something for you. It creates a page full of players that preload and cause Chrome and other browsers to show up. So this person was,
interesting.
Yeah. So I found this one. A person had no idea. And it was really weird. It was like they got these spikes it was a Tuesday and Friday. Every Tuesday and Friday, they were getting these spikes. Didn't line up with when they were releasing episodes, but that was when they were sending out their mailing list. But the spikes there wasn't a spike in distinct listeners. It was really just a spike in downloads. And it was all basically because Aweber would create this page that would have like 15 episodes that were on it. And when you went to the page, it started preloading all of them.
Oh.
Yep.
Very interesting.
So, if you're using Aweber for your mailing list, do not put your RSS feed for your podcast in that.
Well, I'm curious about that stuff now because I do know that there are other places that support RSS feed publishing, other new email newsletters, but I don't know what the execution is in terms of players because the service tends to support folks that are writing stuff on their blog, right? It's not focused on podcasts. I do believe that the Aweber service is a little bit more podcast centric, but there are things like Kit, which used to be ConvertKit. I think MailChimp does the same thing as well, where you can, if you are a paid subscriber or paid whatever, you can send an email every time an RSS feed item is published.
Yeah, this was where, as he's creating the newsletter to go out, email blast, there was a place that says, add links. And then one of the items was add RSS feed, add images, add this. And so they were part of the template from Aweber where you could add images, you could add links, you can add an RSS URL. And it doesn't say podcast. It just said add RSS URL. And he just put his Libsyn one in. Didn't think anything of it. And when it all came together, when the email blast goes out, there's a link for you to look at it on a web page. And on the web page, it would cause the preloading.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So it was anybody that clicked on it, then got the page, and then it preloaded.
And it preloaded all of the media files because it's optimizing for consumption, which is a good thing, but it's not necessarily thinking through the data on the end user for a podcast. And it could inflate numbers based on that.
Very simple. If you're hosting with Libsyn and you're going to create a page, any page with lots of players, make sure you use the Libsyn players because our players will not preload. They do a server-side call, not a URL call, so it's not possible to make them preload. People actually have to click the play button. That will keep your stats from inflating. I've seen it before where people have updated their web page and all of a sudden the numbers go through the roof and they're like, oh, we're so excited. Our new web page is causing such great interaction. No, it's not.
Yeah.
You just put a player that preloads. And this is the first time I saw Aweber.
And very, very interesting. And now you know.
Right. I'm not saying don't use Aweber, please. Any Aweber fans, I'm just saying don't use that feature in Aweber. That's all I'm saying.
All right. So you found this article, or is it a study?
Oh my God.
Or
no, I'm just going to say this about this article. No, and definitely no. That's what I have to say about the next article. I mean, and the article is titled, quote, Podcasting Market Size to Surpass US dollars $217.63 billion by 2032, owing to rising smartphone adoption, on-demand content demand, and expanding monetization models, unquote. They're also claiming that the podcast market size in 2024 was $31.2 billion. Let's do a quick breakdown on this. Podcast market size, what's the realistic size of the podcast market? And U.S. ads on podcasts in 2024 totaled $2.4 billion, according to the IAB and PwC. This is the best survey out there. They talk to all the big companies, getting numbers. So this is by far most accurate number of ads in the podcast space in the US is the IAB PwC report. 2.4 billion. It's anonymous. You report it. They keep the information hidden. They talk to all the big players. And global ad revenue has been estimated to be about 4 billion. So US plus rest of world, 4 billion. That makes the US ad revenue about 60% of the total. Let us be a little more aggressive and say the US is only 50% of global, and we make the global ad revenue 4.8 billion, right? Double what the US is. That's still a long, long way to get to 31.2 billion. So maybe what they're doing is they're saying, hey, when we say the podcast market, we're going to include everything. So, okay, podcast hosting fees. There's around 450,000 active podcasts, and typically paid hosting fee is about $25 a month. That put hosting revenue for 2024 at 135 million. So now we're up to 4.9 billion. Ooh. And then maybe they're also including all the revenues podcasters spend on new gear. And even if we get aggressive and say each year, podcasters spend $500 on gear. Every year, each year, over and over. And again, with 450,000 active, let's say that's 225 million. So now we're at a total of 5.16 billion for 2024. Point is, there's no realistic, reasonable, or rational way anyone can say in 2024 the podcast market was 31.2 billion. And that means the projection of 217 billion by 2032, while something I wish was possible, is also nowhere close to realistic. All this report does is accomplish, though, it does accomplish one thing. It allows me to see all those reporting on this article in the podcasting space that have no clue about the podcasting space by them simply just referencing this report as fact. So if you see anyone reporting this as fact and saying, oh, yes, the podcast space with 31.2 billion and it's going to be 217 billion, any of those people, you know they are people you don't have to listen to in the future about podcasting because they don't know the space, just like the people that created this report. I would love for it to have been a 31.2 billion market last year. I would have loved it, but it's not. It's not even close.
All right. Well, we did have another report from Sounds Profitable that just happened. Actually, we would have missed reporting on this if we would have recorded when we were supposed to have recorded, which was yesterday, because we are recording this morning on September 5th. So please just note that. And this report presentation came out on September 4th in the afternoon. It is called the Podcast Landscape 2025. Mind you, this is part 1. So there's going to be a whole other part 2 that's going to focus on, I believe what Tom said was churn, because this was about the growth of podcasting, or more centered on, what's going on in the landscape overall in the consumption part, and the growth part. And then the second part is going to be on the why people stop consuming podcasts. It's more about the sort of the churn part, which it was split up because there was so much information. So that's coming soon, but that is not what this is. So it's a lot of slides, and I just shared them here with you, Rob. And in terms of the methodology, I just want to mention the methodology for folks that didn't watch it. And again, all links are going to be in the show notes so you guys can consume it, read it for yourselves. But I'm going to just talk about the methodology here. It says here that on June 2025, Sounds Profitable partnered with Signal Hill Insights to field an online study of 5,034 Americans aged 18 plus. That's the largest public study of podcasting in America. The sample was weighted to the most recent census data to be representative of the U.S. population using a single source conducted identically to the 2023 and 2024 studies. Respondents were asked a variety of questions about podcasting, including whether they listen, how often, and why they do or do not listen to podcasts. Topics also included churn, what leads to decreases in listening over time, and general perceptions of the medium and its creators. And again, I think that churn part is absolutely going to happen in a part 2, not in this one that they do.
So let me do a preview on the churn.
Okay.
You have to take podcast consumers and put them in 2 buckets: the audio listeners and the video people, right? Because we're now saying, all these podcasts are video on YouTube. And that's what this initial report was showing, right? So you're going to have two different churns. And if they don't break this out, audio churn and video churn, then they're making huge mistakes. So Tom, if you're listening, Brian, if you're listening, you really need to break it out, because let's look at why you need to break it out. Audio. Who's your competitor in audio? In audio, your competitor is AM, FM radio, it's music, it's other podcasts, right? Your competitors in audio are very limited. In video, who's your competitors? In video, your competitors are the Xbox. I'm binging on Netflix right now, The Lazarus Project, right? So if you start binging a TV show on Netflix, boom, that can be a reason you lose listeners or consumers on video. There's HBO. There's there's live sports. It's football season. You've just lost people for that. It's college basketball season. You've lost people for that. Right? So your competitors on the video side are so much more than there is on the audio side. So why people churn on video is going to become a lot different than audio, where the answer on audio might just be, well, Taylor Swift just released a new album, right? That's a reason for churn, but there's not a lot on the audio side. Another reason for audio churn, a bigger reason usually, is their work habits changed. They're no longer commuting. They were consuming it. They're not working at where they used to work at the factory, and they're not listening to podcasts anymore. So that's a big difference than video, where it's around the rest of your non-work related things, but often you're losing to other video content. So I'm going to be really interested to see how they break it out and what conclusions they came to. But that's my pre-prediction of what they're going to have for their churn report.
I will share my pre-predictions as we continue to talk about this, because I'm curious, at least from when I watched, because I sort of watched. I was one of those people that was with my child because it was her birthday. And oh my gosh, just to give you like a behind the scenes, I wish that I would have had a camera or something. So I went to play. So there's like a ping pong club that they have here. So we took her to do ping pong, playing in this club. And that's what I was doing. I was playing ping pong. So we finished and we were outside waiting for Dad, because Dad talks to everybody in the world. I don't know if your spouse does this, Rob, but my spouse talks to all the people all the time. And I am so antisocial that I just leave. So he was talking to everyone.
So your spouse ever had this? I'm sorry, do I know you? Response? Because my wife's gotten that, because she's that way too. So she's
really?
talking to someone and the person will go, I'm sorry, do I know you?
Oh, no. All that to say, I had the study in my pocket and I was listening outside with my child. So I was listening to the podcast landscape and writing notes, not watching, because I was on my iPhone, which is an iPhone mini. So I can't really see the screen anyway, because it's so small and I'm old. And so I was just writing little notes on there. So that's how I was consuming it. All that to say, let's go ahead and continue on, because I think this plays into my thoughts on the process. But I told you we weren't going to discuss all of the slides here. So what was the big takeaway for you?
Things that jumped out at me. First one was, are you familiar with the term podcast? 96% said yes.
That's huge.
It's huge. That's the highest I've ever seen that number.
Yeah.
So that jumped out at me as number one. And then there was, when was the last time, if ever, you consumed a podcast? 38% in the last week, 17% in the last 30 days. So that's 55% in the last month. That to me is also huge. Over half the people have consumed a podcast in the last month.
Yeah. And also that 38% in the last week, that's huge.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Those first two numbers, those were big ones. Those are ones I'll talk about. I'll use in slides, whatnot. And then there was looking at the following benefits associated with podcasts. How important is each benefit to you? And the ones that said very or somewhat important, 83% picked either very or somewhat important for listen to discussions on topic of interest. Right? Mm-hmm. Searching out something you want to know about. 66% said something to listen to in the car or while traveling. 62% said something to listen to while walking or exercising. 60% said audio to keep me company. Oh, that's so sad.
No, I mean, hey, listen, I do that. But it's not the company that you think, Rob. But anyway, go ahead, continue.
Yeah. So, so that was that. And then 58% said get news or political analysis. So those were your top 5.
And actually, right after, because you said top 5, but also then one below that was learn about new hobbies, which was 54%, the same as the news or political analysis.
And this was the 2025. So you have to look, there's different charts in there. Some was like 2024, some's 2025. I'm basing this on the 2025 number. In any case, these aren't things that I think anyone listening to this podcast would be surprised about, other than the audio to keep you company. But, we've always said, you can listen to a podcast while you're working out, walking the dog, doing gardening, doing laundry, going through the grocery store. And then obviously when you're in the car driving to and from work, it's a good time to be able to listen to podcasts. But ultimately, the number one was to listen to a discussion or topic of interest. People are searching out what they're interested in. This comes back to me always saying there's not a discoverability issue in podcasting. My podcast hasn't been discovered, but the listeners are finding the content that they're interested in by searching, and they're finding it. Again, they might not find yours, and that's where you always have to make sure you're optimizing your show title so that when they search, they find it. Because the most number one reason why people are listening to content here is because it's a topic of interest to them. They're searching it out. That isn't stumble upon. That's not algorithms. That's something that they're going out and searching. I did like this in the report. They have conclusions, and then the one was the dominance. So in this report, it says the dominance of Joe Rogan Experience is beginning to show signs of erosion, quote unquote. Also in this report, top 20 podcasts, Joe Rogan, 11% of respondents as the top podcast, Crime Junkie, 4%, The Daily, 4%, Caller Daddy, 3%, New Heights, 2%, and no one else over 1%. So, seems like Joe is still pretty dominant, at least by their own numbers.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that because it wasn't, I just want to give you context onto what that was. So what that slide is not about consumption. It was question for the people to name their favorite podcast, meaning like, hey, what's your favorite podcast, Rob? What are your top 3 favorite podcasts? What's your first, right? And then you mentioned whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's not listening. It's not watching. And it's also not total audience. So this is not data.
But they didn't have anything about what podcast people were consuming. They asked them the only thing in the report they had about what podcast people were interested in was that one slide. There was nowhere else in there that said anything else about what podcasts that people are listening or watching or consuming. If you're going to say a conclusion of the report is that Joe Rogan's Experience is beginning to show signs of erosion, but the only thing you show in there is his dominance, the two don't weigh. Well, maybe the last time they did the report, he was 13% of respondents, and now he's 11%, but they didn't show that. So there's no way to know that.
You know what? Again, I had it in my pocket. I wrote down notes. I didn't see if they had a slide that said that, but he did. He did have it was 13%. It went down to 11%. And part of it is, and so that's what Tom said, that Rogan went down and the other 3 went up, is what he said. So that's where he was seeing there. And also noting that he didn't say that he wasn't dominant. He said that he's still, literally, he's still dominant right now. But that's not really what Tom was pointing to. When he said signs of erosion, he didn't mean dominance had vanished. He meant that the first cracks are starting to show.
Okay, well then in the report, if you're going to have that as a conclusion of the report, then in that report, you need to show the 2024 numbers versus 2025. Because they did show 2023 and 2024 and 2025 in different places.
Right.
So I'm just saying you can't have that as a conclusion of a report when there's no data in that report that shows that that is a conclusion.
Okay. So if you're looking at the slides, I give you that. But again, because what he said in terms of he said, the early signs don't erase the dominance, right? Because he is. You can see the numbers. They just suggested it may not be as solid going forward. And so the only way to find out is as it moves forward. And he just pointed out 11%, that's down from 13%, and that the percentage points of Crime Junkie and The Daily moved from 2% to 4%. And Call Her Daddy went from 1% to 3% year over year. And those are pretty large amounts of people with, again, Joe is still at 11. So it's still a lot, but It's from the top to the bottom thing that he was pointing out to. It wasn't necessarily, it's just Joe. It's the other part. Anyway, that is it.
Still a big gap between 1 and 2.
Yes, there is. Absolutely. Yeah, because it's 4% to 11, right?
Right.
That's like a bunch. That's
right.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that stuck out to me to the point of, what you were talking about at the beginning and the behavior of audio versus video consumption and the churn of it all. And also my behavior that I illustrated in consuming this as if, let's pretend these reports were a podcast, that they were being delivered as podcasts and I had them in my pocket and whatever. And I'm living my life. I think that as we move forward with media consumption, the context is going to matter a lot more than ever before. So the churn or the growth of podcasting is going to continue to rely a lot more on life, on where people are doing stuff and how you're consuming things. You also mentioned, I believe, sports and conversations around sports or something like this. And one of the things that has, meaning competing with the audio, with the video, like, football season coming up, and that's possibly taking people's attention here and there and all of that stuff. I absolutely agree with that. And I do believe that now the media consumption of it all is now going to be influenced a lot more by seasonal consumption. I believe in seasons. Everything has seasons, including life. And so if somebody is stopping maybe watching podcasts on YouTube to watch football, fine. It's actually going to be a little bit, how would I say it? That's when I'm going to start to listen to more podcasts about football versus maybe my favorite podcast about, I don't know, D&D, right?
I just realized something. Okay. All right. So this brings up a good point. 60% people say audio to keep me company. Football season just kicked off.
Right.
True crime podcasts are going to, I think, have an uptick in football season because the husbands are all going off watching football and the wives are going to watch listen to true crime podcasts to keep them company. I bet you there's some sort of effect there.
Absolutely. I think the utility of a podcast and the behavior of people as they consume content is part of their life now. I do feel that there's a lot more nuance to this in the perspective of it's not necessarily audio versus video and getting that data. I believe context and seasonal life behavior is going to affect that consumption a lot more. And let's take even going back to school. Let's say in the mornings, I might be consuming an audio podcast because my children, I'm getting them to go to school or something like that. And then as the children go away, now that they're at school, I might have the option of turning on the video portion and being able to focus on that because when they're at home, I'm not going to be able to do that. That doesn't mean that I prefer video versus audio or audio versus video. Is that in my utility in my life, I'm going to be consuming different depending on where I am and what's happening. So do I appreciate the slides that were shared in this study? Absolutely. I was unable to watch anything that was happening. I listened and I wrote notes really quickly, but I wasn't watching. Later on, I looked at the slides and I was like, oh, and I'm referencing back. So I appreciate both. And part of the study that really kind of opened my eyes to all of this is listening to Tom talk about it, right? So the context in which you are even reading the PDF, because that's yet another context. You didn't consume the study, I assume, Rob. I don't want to.
No, I just read through the whole PDF.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a different context given the consumption of it. You were flying yesterday. You didn't, for whatever reason. So you've lost a certain thing there. And that's what tends to happen with some people that are watching video versus not listening to video, which are listening to transcripts or reading the transcripts. It's the utility of it all. The information is still the same-ish. So my thought in terms of the churn of it all is not necessarily based on audio and video or whether audio or video or whatever. It's life. It's like if I'm really super hyper stressed out in my life, I tend to lean into audiobooks. I tend to lean into wanting a story that takes me away, long form storytelling, fiction, that is something that can take me away from, whatever, or listening to music. Like those are my two, when I'm stressed out, behaviors. When I'm not stressed out, I'm a little bit more open to consuming a lot more content in different ways. Yeah. Anyway, I think life is the churn versus audio versus video. That's my take. And mind you, we don't even have the information.
And I hope they do break it out, audio versus video, because I do think the churn reasons will be different. I hope they do break it out. Yeah, we'll see. Well, I want to see which one is more affected by life. Is it video that's more affected by life or audio? Which one?
That's sort of where I was leaning towards, because I've also seen now moving into, there's going to be an upcoming study called The Creators, which was the first study that sounds profitable put out there in 2022. It's called The Creators, and they haven't done it until here coming up soon. And they had two slides, like as a sneak peek, but I don't want to talk about the slides at this moment. I just want to share that one of the key things that I've been working people with has been transitions from, not to quit podcasting, but people are they're sitting with I've been doing this for a long time. I don't know if I want to keep on doing this anymore, or I don't know if this is the podcast I want to be creating, those kinds of questions. And most of the people that I've been working with are not pushing back against podcasting as a medium. They're not disappointed with the performance of their podcast. They're not disappointed with their work. It's not about that. It's that they personally don't know if this is who they are anymore, which is not a medium question. It's a human question. It's like we've gotten to a point where you can feel that, again, seasonally, sometimes you just want to stop creating content. You're done with it. It's over. It's time to move on to my next season of life. It may or may not include me getting behind the mic. The end. So that is not saying something about podcasting. All that to say, in this creator study that we have here, these two sneak peek slides that they shared, is that they're really interesting. There's, a pie chart there of 83% that have never created a podcast. That's crazy. To 17% of current past podcast creators. Again, we don't have
Well, 17% that have actually ever created a podcast is a huge number.
Yeah. I mean, but all I'm saying, 83 have never created a podcast. And actually, we don't know what the question was, which is another part. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't know if this is like, we don't know what the exact prompt of this question is. But also, I believe at the bottom it says the base of have ever consumed a podcast. So it just kind of shows like the people who consume podcasts. Not all people who consume podcasts create podcasts, which I would agree with. Because, hey, I consume movies. I also do not make them. So, nor do I want to. And then there's another slide that, again, from the same base, 32% have created podcasts in the past and aren't currently. 20% currently creating audio podcasts. 24% currently creating video. And 24% currently creating both audio and video.
That number of those that are currently creating seems really high. I mean, if 17% are currently have ever created a podcast, and then they break that off, that 17%, I'm assuming what they did is they said 17% current or past podcast creators. Then they asked those 17%, have you created a podcast in the past but are not currently doing it? That was 32% of the 17% are pod faders.
Yes.
Right. So that means 68% are not pod faders. That number seems really, really off. Just based on the data that we see of podcasters coming in and out of the space and pod fading, and the number of active podcasts that there have released content in the last 90 days versus have ever had a podcast feed in Apple Podcasts. It's 450,000 have released something in the last 90 days versus 2.9 million that have ever done something, that the survey number doesn't match up with two measured data.
Yeah, you know what's also interesting? And by the way, you guys, we're extrapolating off of 2 slides without any facts, without any other data. We're just looking at a screen and thinking out loud with no context. So yeah, but it also says creating audio and creating both audio and video. It doesn't say creating both audio and video podcasts. Because
that's true.
It could. Hey, listen, I created video yesterday. Mm-hmm. I don't have a video podcast, and I don't also have a YouTube channel. I did create video, and I put it on Instagram, right? I put it on TikTok, or I don't have a TikTok channel, but I put it on TikTok. I created video. I create video almost every day, personally, but it's not a podcast because it's a short form content, right? So I'm just saying that there's always video. To me, there's always video creation happening. I'm constantly creating video on my phone, constantly. Whether I publish that video or not is a different story. But I do have it. I'm capturing it for sure. So context could actually matter here in terms of that too, Rob.
Yeah. Taking video on my iPhone of the mama deer and her 2 baby deers walking through my backyard each day.
See?
Makes me a video creator.
Exactly.
I even share it with my wife and kids. She said, stop sending me this. It will be interesting to see the question that went with that slide.
Absolutely. And you guys, listen, all of this stuff, you can sign up for every single one of their things. I'm going to put a link in the show notes here so you guys can sign up for these studies that are upcoming. And probably one of the best things that you could do is sign up for their email, and you will get information with their email newsletter of the studies that are coming up. And that way you can know. And I know that they do have the creators is coming up. The second part of the this one, the podcast landscape, is coming up. And I think that those are both going to be really great for you guys to check out. So all links will be in the show notes. All right, Rob, switching gears now. This is, I just want to talk through this because I do feel this is happening not a lot. It's not that's a lot. It's just, it's one of those things that happens that becomes annoying, a problem that doesn't happen a lot, but when it happens, it's annoying. It's basically about losing access to Apple Podcasts, your account, I guess, or your access to your podcast on Apple Podcasts because your email address associated with the Apple ID, either you do not have access to, or Apple Podcast Connect didn't exist before you started the podcast. Can we talk through this a little bit? Podcaster has lost their initial email address. They don't even know what email is associated with their podcast in Apple Podcast. And for this example, the podcast was started in 2017. So how do we get this person claiming their podcast again? Because by the way, they sort of pod faded, but they came back.
Well, if the podcast is live and it's still an Apple Podcast and they have access to the RSS feed with Libsyn, they can get a token. They can request a token, and then in the Libsyn.
Where do they request the token?
They have to create a new Apple Podcast Connect account.
Oh, okay.
So you create a Podcast Connect account with a valid Apple ID, right? Because if you want to claim it from Apple, you have to claim it into a Podcast Connect account. So you go to Apple Podcast Connect and you go right there, and there's a place that says like claim podcast at the bottom on the podcast page in there. So you claim podcast and you put in the URL, the Apple Podcast URL. You put that in, and then it gives you a token that you then go and bring over to Libsyn, and there's a field in settings for the Apple Podcast token. And you put that in, and then within a few hours, the podcast is claimed and it's in your Apple Podcast account. That's the simplest way. Now, not all podcast hosts have that feature available. And for others, there's other ways you have to go about claiming it. I think the biggest issue is when you don't have access to the RSS feed, right? And you want to claim it. So you really need to have access to the RSS feed. So in the case of someone that wants to claim a podcast that was with a host, if that show just shut down recently, they have to reopen it and they have to get re-access to that show. So number one is, before anything, is making sure you have access and ownership of the RSS feed. So you can go in and add in your email address. Because like Spotify, if you want to claim it in Spotify, you have to have your email address in there to then get that code sent to you. Is over on Spotify, if you want to go to Spotify, or podcasters.spotify.com to claim there a podcast, you put in the RSS feed, and then it says, okay, we're going to send this code to this email address that's in the feed. And then you got to go get the code and type it in and hope it works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's another story. But the point is, without your having access to the RSS feed, that's the biggest issue. If you do have access to it, then claiming it, if you're hosting with Libsyn, is really easy. If you're somewhere else that doesn't have full Apple access and doesn't support the token, then you have to go through their support, and you again make sure your email address is in the feed, and then work with the Apple support team for claiming it. So
it'll be more back and forth with Apple directly.
Yes.
Okay.
But number one, get the feed, get control of the feed. Everything else, get control of the feed and get your email address in that feed.
Your updated email address. So that brings us back to the initial reason why I brought this up too, which is that oftentimes when podcasts are started, I feel that there are two ways in which people think about email addresses. Sometimes they use an email address that is just for accounts or for things that they don't check very much. It's like their trashy email account. It's the one that they use for things that they don't want to check. And then there's other people who decide, I'm going to make a special email account with a special domain only for this podcast because I want all my branding to really match. And sometimes they decide that domain name expires, they lose control of the domain name, and now they don't have access to their email address, or the other one they never check and then it disappears, or they don't know that anything's going to that other email address. All this to say, when you're using a podcast or when you are creating a podcast or whatever, use an email address that you will check and that you do not foresee ever getting rid of or forgetting about. It has to be very in your face, because the reason this happens a lot is because people they always go, I had an email address and I think I used this email address, but I don't remember what email address it was that I used. And I don't have an address that anymore. You forget what you have attached to said email addresses. So use one that you will check, because as you can hear from Rob, the email address is probably one of the most important ways for you to reclaim a feed, open up accounts and conversations between platform providers. That's what they're going to be looking at a lot of the time.
But the other one thing we need to talk about here is if your show happen to be in a channel. You have multiple shows in a channel and you lose control. We had that happen with a client in the past where they had multiple shows in channels. You can't get the token. You can't request a token for a show that's in a channel. You can't pull it out of another channel. In that scenario, they lost control of the email address that was for the Apple ID. And we had to have Apple step in and help them out because there was nothing they could do because of that. So like Elsie said, email address is so important. Control of the RSS feed is so important. Having an RSS feed where the email address is in it is important. Those are all real key things to making sure that you can control and maintain ownership of your show and you won't have these problems.
Yep. All right. Well, I hope, if you have any other questions about this, send us an email, thefeed@libsyn.com. I do know that it's very frustrating, and I also understand the back and forth that it takes sometimes to do something that's this kind of annoying. So it's not that it's hard or that it takes a long time to do this. It's just a workflow where it's a little bit of a disruptor in your day when you're trying to get all of stuff together. So I would suggest, I guess, for those of you who are starting podcasts, keep like a database or a document, a text document where you just write in, this is the login I used. This is the email address that I used. even where you write down, your podcast title, your podcast artwork, your podcast description. I think I've talked about this in the past. Just also add, this is the email associated with my RSS feed. And that way you remember, because we forget. And especially podcasts that started way back in the day. And let's say you did pod fade and you're looking to come back and turn everything back on, from 2017 to what we used to do with Apple Podcasts in 2017 versus what's happening right now in 2025. It's very different. It's not the way that it used to be. So just write all the stuff down. Okay, Rob, what are we looking at here as we move forward?
So this was an article titled, quote, "Sharing podcasts just got easier in Spotify with launch of in-app messages," unquote. And from the article, I'll read verbatim out of the article, and then we'll talk about it briefly here. Quote, "Nearly 1 in 5 weekly audio podcast listeners say the biggest source of recommendations about new shows comes from friends and family, according to the latest Edison research data." This is called word of mouth marketing. And now Spotify is making it easier for users to share that information. Beginning this week, it is rolling out a new messages feature where users can have one-on-one conversations about what they are listening to. Quote. And then also from the article, quote, "Messages will start to be available to free and premium users aged 16 and older in select markets on mobile devices," unquote. So rolling out this week to select markets for 16 and older. So just want to make sure it's not everyone thinks everyone's getting it all at once, but they're enabling better word of mouth marketing. And that's a good thing for podcasts. If you have a good podcast and you have a decent sized audience in Spotify, a new call to action is make sure you message your friends on Spotify about our podcast. That should be, if you look at your numbers and you're one of those people that is 10%, 15%, 5% even on Spotify or more, put a call to action in there for your Spotify listeners to message their friends and family and tell them about your podcast.
That makes total sense. If you are a heavy Spotify user, I know that it's a pain in the behind when you're trying to share a podcast episode or sometimes even short form videos. Like, let's say if my mom sends me a short form video that she saw on Facebook, and I happen to generally don't have Facebook installed in my phone. And if she sends that to me via message and I can't really open that message, it's very annoying. So this seems to me that it's a good idea to be able to just send it to your friends, especially when you're listening. And by the way, yes, it's for podcasts and also for other things. So audiobooks and music and things like that. So I think that that's another way to be able to share contextually, meaning, let's say, here's an idea, guys, on Spotify specifically. You happen to be binge watching the latest, everybody's talking about the Netflix documentary called Unknown Caller. I don't know if you've heard about this, Rob. I suggest if you haven't watched it. It's really shocking. Okay. But anyway.
Is it a true crime?
It is true crime. It is absolutely true crime. Your mouth is going, I'm not going to spoil it for you. Do not read anything about Unknown Caller. Just watch it. Okay? I promise. Let's say you just watched Unknown Caller and you are doing what everybody else is doing, sort of flabbergasted, going, what is happening? I want to know more. Then you can share with your friends podcasts that are covering the documentary Unknown Caller, and you can start to send those to your friends because let's say you and your buddies watch this thing. Now you can share podcasts that cover it. And I'm sure those people who maybe have never listened to a podcast now will listen to the podcast because we just learned from the Sounds Profitable study that topics that you're interested in, listen to discussions on topics of interest. It's 83% of the benefits. So sending Unknown Caller to somebody who's never listened to a podcast that's being discussed, I guarantee you that person is going to become a podcast convert just because they're interested in the documentary.
Yep. I mean, people find topics, again, that they're interested in 2 ways. Search, word of mouth. Word of mouth and search. Those are the two biggest ways. I mean, there's others, but those are the two biggest.
I'm going to add another one here to you, Rob, just like as I'm going to add topic of interest, because I do think that when folks get turned on to a topic, they don't care what the media they're using to learn more about said topic is when they're obsessed with it. And it's a really great discovery tool for that. Hey, you're interested in this? Here's this. It's a lot more in depth. Here's a podcast episode on that. Oh, I didn't know.
I'm at a conference where people are really interested in a specific topic. And
yeah,
in the plane ride coming over here, close to half the people on the plane from Nashville to Denver were coming for True Crime Podcast. And I could tell because they literally had T-shirts that were different True Crime podcasts. Like one person walked by and at the bottom of her shirt, it said serial killers. And I went, "You're going to True Crime? They're going to CrimeCon?" She's like, "Yes."
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was a good percentage. Seemed like half the people that walked past me were going to CrimeCon just based on what they were wearing, and they were letting people know. So yeah, I mean, when people find a topic of interest, they don't consume just one show in that topic. They find others.
Yeah. And they add different parts of media. Like I said, like this documentary on Netflix is a really good documentary. But if you are really curious about that specific true crime story, you are going to go find articles about it. You're going to go find podcast episodes that cover it. And if your podcast is a great podcast that offers value to somebody who's really interested in this topic, they will more than likely come back, even when you're not covering the things that they're interested about, because they'll find you as a source of information of things they tend to like. So yeah, the topics I think are a great way to expand interest and podcast growth in general.
Oh, by the way, the T-shirts here we were setting up last night, and some of the T-shirts are pretty funny. One of them it says, "You know who else likes to take long walks in the woods? Serial killers." Then it said, "I'm staying home and listening to True Crime Podcasts."
I love that.
And it said, another one said, "Be nice, don't kill anyone." And then on the front of the shirt, it said, "Seriously."
That's genius. Those are so fun.
Yes. And then there was one show, I'll give them credit here, True Crime Cast. Their swag is a little syringe, which looks like it has blood in it. And it's a pen. So it's a little pen, which is shaped like a syringe with blood in it. And
oh my God.
I had to grab that.
The creativity is astounding. I love it for all the reasons. Oh my God. That is so good.
And you have to understand, there's a lot of podcasters here, and they all have their business cards out on their booths. Uh-huh. So I'm just like in hog heaven.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at all the different business cards from people. Oh, I like that design. I like that one.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. I think the show floor there would probably be something that I'd really enjoy, like walking through, because it's just so unusual and so fun to find all the really great things. Anyway.
So last episode, we talked about Taylor Swift and her appearance on New Heights and the record that was set. And there was a record that was set. It was for the most concurrent live audience members for a YouTube live stream at 1.3 million people. That was confirmed by Guinness World Record, which is, I think, what we had kind of said. I'm not sure if we said it, but I just wanted to make sure we clarified. It was not the record for the most views in the first 24 hours, as some had reported. It was the most concurrent people on the feed at the same time. So not that 1.3 million people came in and out. At one moment in time, there were 1.3 million people all listening to Taylor and Travis and Jason talk. And oh, by the way, they're engaged. So
oh my God, Rob. I cannot.
We recorded that before they got engaged, and I was saying I hope they get married. And it was like, no, didn't have any inside info, but I was just hopes. And yeah, I'm so tickled. Anyway.
Oh my God, I have a feeling. Here's the other thing that I don't think I said this. I can't remember what I said, but I had a feeling that she would not have done this. I don't know, that there's like a moment in there where I just don't feel that she would have done this if it wasn't, mind you, she got engaged after, supposedly.
He popped the question 2 weeks before the episode went out.
Well, before the episode aired, but it was on the day that they recorded.
Oh, was it?
Yes, it was. So the day they got, this is the story.
No, because they did a live stream. They
got engaged after recording that episode. The episode went live 2 weeks later or whatever.
Oh.
But they recorded supposedly. So my thought was, I don't believe that Taylor would have gone so hard on planning this whole thing with a podcast episode if they weren't really sealing that deal. She's not like that. Like, I was like, I think that there's something else in here where this feels a lot more committed. Not to say that she knew she was going to get engaged or anything like that, but maybe she did, right? And it just happened to be that everything happened at the same time and all of that. And
anyway, I'm very happy for both of them. And all the haters can just go away.
They can go away. Yeah, but everybody is talking about it. But alas, okay, good. Well, record's set. Mm-hmm. And that is a good record to say.
And he put a ring on it. Good job.
And he put a ring on it. Yeah.
And I hope you have a great season. Let's go out with a Super Bowl ring. Hopefully he'll get 2 rings in the next year. Wedding ring and a Super Bowl ring.
How long is football season again? When is it over? February,
it's over
right?
In February.
That's usually the Super Bowl happens during my birthday, which is very annoying. Ugh. I was always very disturbed that there was always some kind of Super Bowl party happening when it was my birthday. All right. Alas, I think that we're moving now over to some stats, mean and median numbers for you today, Rob.
Yes. And these are the mean and median numbers are based on all episodes released on Libsyn and Libsyn Pro in the month of July, with downloads measured until the end of August. On average, each file was about 45 days old. This is again per all shows hosted on Libsyn and Libsyn Pro. The median number for July was 126, which was up a bit from 122 in June. The adjusted mean average, where I throw out the top 0.5% in any files with 3 or less downloads, the adjusted mean for July was 1,221. Also up a little bit from June when it was 1,202. 5.7% of all downloads for eps released in July were in the 5K range or greater. This is up a smidge from June's 5.6%. And then here are some numbers to measure against. And to put things in perspective, if your episodes are getting over 126 downloads after 30 days, you are better than half the shows. If you're getting more than 500, you are better than 72% of the shows. If you're getting more than 900, you are better than 80% of shows. More than 2,800, better than 90%. More than 5,900, better than 95%. More than 16,000, better than 98%. More than 32,000, better than 99%. Isn't it interesting that go from 98 to 99 and you double from 16 to 32 exactly? And July's numbers were for the most part up a smidge or a bit compared to June's, or the same, but it was more up just a little bit. So that's a good thing to see. We'll see how September tends to usually go up again because people are getting back into the school and driving kids to school and all those things. Again, life, right? As we talked about earlier, churn, and there's reverse churn, right? Nobody talks about reverse churn for the audience where they come back.
Reverse churn.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to coin that.
What are they turning away from up there? That's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's like churn. It's churn for whatever it is that they were doing prior to.
Okay. All right. So anyway, there's your numbers. All right. Where have we been? I'll see. Where have you been? You were featured.
Where have I been? I was featured on a list on the Podglomerate for podcast pros to follow on social media, you guys. So link is going to be in the show notes. I'm super, very honored to be part of this list. It's really kind of jam-packed with a lot of people on it, which is great. So if you guys head over, maybe you can see some people that you'd like to follow there. Maybe you can, there's just maybe folks that haven't been in your radar or whatever. It would be a great list for you to follow overall. I'm super honored again. Thank you so much to the Podglomerate team for this. And Morgan, thank you for your kind words about all of this stuff and putting this together. Super, super amazing. And on the blog, Rob, we have a little compilation blog post in there, you do have a little blurb in it already, which is about some podcast movement sound bites. Wisdom from the Libsyn team. And they're just little blurbs of all of the wise, not all of the wise things, because there were a lot of wise things happening for the team as a whole. Just a compilation of tiny little bits of insight and quotes. It's a really fun, easy read. Please head over there and just take a look. And also, there is a new blog post that is in support of Brian's presentation that he did on Podcast Movement, which was all about AI podcasting tools and workflows. It's a really great post. So head on over to that blog post at all. So especially if you maybe attended Brian's session at Podcast Movement, and if you did not, you can just go to that blog post and you can see what he talked about in there. He's got some great prompts to just work exactly what it says. It's basically working smarter, not harder. So there's some prompts in there on how to use your transcript to help you create all of the metadata for your podcast. So he doesn't really go into production, if you will, as in like audio and video. He does have little tips on that. It's mostly about the post-production after your podcast is done. But he does have some good tools and things like that. So please head over to the blog to check that out. All links are in the show notes.
All right. Where have I been and where I'm going is actually the same thing, CrimeCon. So I've been there for half a day, and I'm going there for the next 3 days. And report on that more on the next episode. I'll let you know how it went.
Yeah, and I believe in the next place that we are going is Afros and Audio in Baltimore in October. So that's where we are going. I think Corey will be there. And if you are in Baltimore, check it out. It's actually a really great event that is also kind of in that same sense of CrimeCon, meaning the topic of interest. It's a very specific type of interest there. And I think one of the reasons that I really love Afros and Audio is because it really centers the independent voices overall. It is super down to earth, super community driven. It really makes sure the storytellers, the people who are just doing this for the love of it, the building of community, the leadership there is really solid also for Afros and Audio. So if you're in Baltimore, go check it out. It's going to be amazing. I'll have a link in the show notes there. And then we have Podfest. Is that correct? There might be something in between October and January, but I'm not sure, Rob, as of yet, at least. But I can't remember. And if we do have something there, we'll just add it next time. Podfest we have going on in Orlando in January, NRB in Nashville in February, NAB in April in Las Vegas, and the podcast show in London in May 2026. Oh my gosh, so many other things already.
That's everything, yeah. Everything through right now, most of the things through the first half of next year.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness. All right. Well,
there might be something to do with Podcast Movement Evolutions at South by Southwest.
Oh, that's right. There might be something like that.
But I haven't heard anything official if we're going to be there or not. So,
yeah.
But right now, these are ones that we know of that we have coming up.
Fantastic.
We'll talk more again about CrimeCon next time, and if anyone knows of any other good conferences that we should be at, please let us know.
All right, folks. Well, then we will chat with you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Don't forget, if you have any feedback, anything for what we said or didn't say on the show, you can record that feedback. We'd love to get your audio feedback. It's filler. We love it. Did I say filler? I'm sorry. I meant it's great content.
All right.
Email it to us, the feed at libsyn.com, or you can call us 412-573-1934, or you can use SpeakPipe at speakpipe.com/thefeed.
Woohoo.
All right. Till next time. Ciao.
Bye.